The laughter erupted before Sienna hardly could stop herself. "Oh my God, are those Velcro?" she said loud enough for half the Starbucks to hear. "Like actual Velcro sneakers? What is this, 1987? The old man standing in line ahead of her didn't turn around. He just stood there in his worn jacket, his white hair neatly combed, his posture impossibly straight, despite what had to be at least 75 years on this earth. And yes, he was wearing sneakers with Velcro straps instead of laces. White sneakers that had seen better days, scuffed and yellowed with age. Sienna's friend Becca giggled beside her. "Probably can't tie his shoes anymore." "My grandpa has those. It's like sad." "It's not sad, it's just, why even leave the house looking like that?" Sienna pulled out her phone, angling for a discreet photo. The shoes were too perfect, too absurdly outdated. Her Instagram followers would eat this up. I mean, have some self-respect, you know. The man shifted slightly, and Sienna noticed more details. The jacket was military green but faded, with patches that looked official but worn. His pants were pressed with crisp creases, like he'd actually ironed them. Everything about him screamed, trying too hard, mixed with gave up decades ago. Next, the barista called, and the old man stepped forward. "Good morning," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "Just a regular coffee, please. Black, medium. That'll be $3.75. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. Not a wallet, actually. One of those ancient bifold things that snapped shut, the kind Sienna's grandfather had used before he discovered that normal people kept their cards in phone cases or designer card holders. This one was leather, cracked and faded, held together at one corner with what looked like electrical tape. Sienna couldn't help herself. She leaned toward Becca and whispered just loud enough, "Even his wallet has Velcro energy?" Becca snorted, quickly covering her mouth. The man's hands trembled slightly as he opened the wallet, and Sienna felt a flicker of something, guilt maybe, but pushed it away. She wasn't being cruel. She was just observing, commenting. It was what people did. If you couldn't handle a little judgment, maybe don't go out in public looking like you raided a thrift store's reject bin. He pulled out 4 $1 bills and counted out 3 quarters, carefully placing them on the counter. The barista smiled at him warmly, too warmly, Sienna thought, like she was overcompensating for his obvious poverty. "Thank you, sir. It'll be right up." "Appreciate it," the man said, and moved to the waiting area. Sienna and Becca stepped up toward him. Sienna got her usual, venti iced caramel macchiato with extra caramel drizzle, oat milk, and an extra shot. Is $7.85. She tapped her phone to pay without thinking about it. They moved to wait for their drinks, standing uncomfortably close to the old man. Sienna could smell his cologne now, Old Spice or something equally ancient, the kind that came in glass bottles and hadn't been reformulated since the Nixon administration. "Sienna," Becca whispered, nodding toward the man. "Look at his jacket." Sienna looked. On the breast of the faded military jacket was a patch she hadn't noticed before. It had an eagle, some text she couldn't read from this angle, and several small pins or medals clustered around it. Oh, God, is he one of those stolen valor guys? Sienna said quietly, "My dad told me about those. People who pretend to be veterans to get free stuff and sympathy." "Maybe," Becca said uncertainly. "But those patches look kind of real." "Please, you can buy that stuff on Amazon." "My cousin got a whole military costume for Halloween last year," the barista called out. "Medium black coffee." The old man reached for his cup, and as he did, his sleeve rode up slightly. Sienna caught a glimpse of his forearm, scarred badly. Not like a surgical scar, but something else. Something that looked like it had hurt. Really hurt. The man noticed her staring and quickly pulled his sleeve down. For a moment their eyes met, and Sienna saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten. Not anger, not even hurt, just weariness, like he was used to this. Like he'd seen this exact scenario play out 1,000 times before. He walked toward the door, moving slowly but steadily, his posture still military straight despite the obvious age in his movements. Total stolen valor, Sienna said as soon as he was gone, loud enough for the barista and several other customers to hear. I bet he's never even been in the military. Just wants attention and free coffee. The barista's smile disappeared. Actually, she said, her voice tight, that's Mr. Walter Donovan. He comes in every Tuesday and Friday. He's a real veteran, Vietnam. Sure he is, Sienna said dismissively. That's what they all say. Venti iced caramel macchiato, another barista called. Sienna grabbed her drink and headed for the door, Becca following. As they stepped outside into the November morning, Sienna pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Okay, I didn't get a photo, but I can still, she started typing. Composing a text post, just saw the saddest thing at Starbucks. Old guy pretending to be a veteran, wearing the most tragic outfit I've ever seen. Velcro shoes, people, Velcro, and a wallet held together with tape. Like, if you're going to commit to the costume, at least make it believable. Who's stolen valor, who's try harder, who's fashion crimes, she hit post. Within seconds, the likes started rolling in. Okay, I need to get to class, Becca said, checking her phone. Professor Chen is doing attendance today, and I'm already on her shit list. Yeah, I've got my marketing presentation in 20 minutes. Sienna took a long sip of her macchiato. Perfect, as always. $7 well spent. They parted ways, and Sienna headed toward the university campus, which was conveniently located just 2 blocks from her favorite Starbucks. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect fall weather. The kind of day where everything felt possible, where being young and attractive and attending an expensive private university felt like exactly what life was supposed to be. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Her post was getting traction. Comments were rolling in. Stolen valor is so disrespectful to real veterans. Why do people do this? Did you report him? I hate people like this. One comment, though, stood out. Did you actually ask if he was a veteran, or did you just assume? Because you sound like a judgmental brat. Sienna deleted it immediately and blocked the user. Negative energy wasn't welcome on her feed. She arrived at the Whitmore Business Building, named after some wealthy donor family, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Her marketing class was in room 412, and she slid into her usual seat near the back with 3 minutes to spare. Professor Ashford was setting up her presentation slides at the front. She was one of those young professors who tried too hard to be relatable, wearing blazers with jeans and making references to TikTok trends that were already outdated. All right, everyone, settle in, Professor Ashford said as the clock hit 9 a.m. Today, we're continuing our unit on brand authenticity and consumer trust. And I have a special guest joining us. The door opened and a woman entered. She was maybe 50, wearing a professional pantsuit, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from actual accomplishment, not just expensive clothes. This is Dr. Patricia Reeves, Professor Ashford announced. She's the director of the Veterans Advocacy Center here in the city, and she's going to talk to us about how organizations can authentically serve and market to veteran communities without falling into exploitation or stolen valor issues. Sienna felt her stomach flip. What were the odds? Dr. Reeves smiled at the class. Thank you for having me. I know you're all busy with your studies, so I'll try to make this engaging and relevant to your careers. She connected her laptop to the projector, and the first slide appeared, Understanding Military Service Beyond the Stereotypes. Let's start with a question, Dr. Reeves said. How many of you personally know someone who served in the military? About a third of the hands went up. Sienna kept hers down. She didn't know any veterans. Well, except for that fake one from Starbucks an hour ago, but he didn't count. Interesting. That's actually about average for your generation. The reality is that less than 1% of Americans serve in the military today, which means most of you have no direct connection to military life or culture. This creates a gap, a knowledge gap that often leads to misunderstandings. The next slide showed photographs of veterans at different ages. Young, old male, female, different races and body types. One of the biggest misunderstandings is what veterans look like. When I say veteran, what image comes to mind? Someone in uniform, one student called out. Old guys at the VA hospital, said another. People with PTSD, someone else offered. Dr. Reeves nodded. All of those can be true, but veterans are also the person who teaches your yoga class, or manages your favorite restaurant, or sits next to you on the bus wearing completely normal clothes. They're teachers, doctors, accountants, baristas. They're everyone. Sienna shifted in her seat. The word barista felt pointed, though obviously it wasn't. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Stolen valor and false accusations. The next slide appeared, showing statistics. Stolen valor, people falsely claiming military service, is a real problem. It's disrespectful and in some cases illegal. But do you know what's also a problem? The rush to judgment. The immediate assumption that a veteran who doesn't fit your mental image must be faking. Dr. Reeves clicked to the next slide, which showed news articles about veterans who'd been accused of stolen valor and publicly humiliated, only to be proven legitimate. This veteran, she pointed to one article, was confronted in a grocery store and accused of faking his service because he looked too young to be a decorated officer. He was 32 and had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. This veteran, she moved to another article, was mocked on social media because she was a woman wearing a military jacket with combat patches. People said women don't serve in combat roles, except she was a helicopter pilot who'd flown over 200 combat missions. And this veteran, Dr. Reeves's voice softened, was harassed in a restaurant because his uniform didn't look right to someone who'd never served but had watched a lot of war movies. He left without finishing his meal. He didn't return to that restaurant, and he told his therapist it reminded him of coming home from Vietnam, when people spat on veterans and called them baby killers. The classroom was silent. The point, Dr. Reeves continued, is that stolen valor is real and wrong. But so is the weaponization of that accusation against real veterans, especially older veterans, especially veterans who are struggling financially or with health issues or with the invisible wounds of war. Sienna's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Let me tell you about Vietnam veterans specifically, Dr. Reeves said. These are men and women who were drafted, forced to serve in an unpopular war. They came home to a country that blamed them personally for government policy. They were denied VA benefits. They struggled with undiagnosed PTSD. They self-medicated with alcohol and drugs. They became homeless at alarming rates. They died by suicide. And now, 50 years later, the ones who survived are elderly. They're on fixed incomes. They have health problems from exposure to Agent Orange and other toxins. They're proud of their service, but often don't talk about it because they remember what happened when they came home. Another slide appeared, this one showing photographs of items, old uniforms, faded patches, or worn boots. You might see a Vietnam veteran wearing old military gear, not because he's trying to get free coffee, but because those items are literally all he has left from that period of his life. From the brothers he lost, from the person he was before the war changed him. Wearing that jacket isn't about stolen valor. It's about memory, honor, survival. Sienna felt like the room was shrinking. Every word Dr. Reeves spoke seemed aimed directly at her, though rationally she knew that was impossible. The professor couldn't know about her Instagram post. Couldn't know about the old man at Starbucks, couldn't she? "Now I want to show you something," Dr. Reeves said, clicking to a new slide. This one showed a photograph of a young soldier, maybe 20 years old, grinning at the camera in his dress uniform. He was handsome, clean-cut, radiating confidence and youth. This is specialist Walter Donovan, photographed in 1968, right before his deployment to Vietnam. He was 19 years old. He'd enlisted against his parents' wishes because he believed in serving his country. Sienna's blood ran cold. Walter Donovan. The same name the barista had said. But it couldn't be the same person. It had to be a coincidence. Walter served as a combat medic in the 1st Cavalry Division. For those of you unfamiliar with military roles, medics are unarmed personnel who run toward gunfire to save wounded soldiers. They have one of the highest casualty rates in combat. They see the absolute worst of war, the broken bodies, the dying kids, the impossible choices about who can be saved and who can't. The next slide showed a black and white photograph of soldiers in the jungle. Dr. Reeves pointed to one of them. "That's Walter, center frame, treating a wounded soldier during a firefight. He was shot twice during his first tour. He re-enlisted anyway. Went back for a second tour because his unit needed experienced medics." Sienna's hands were shaking now. She glanced at her phone, still getting notifications from her Instagram post. Dozens of comments about the fake veteran with Velcro shoes. During his second tour, Walter's convoy was ambushed. An IED, improvised explosive device, detonated under the lead vehicle. Walter was in the second vehicle. Despite being injured himself, he climbed out and ran to the burning wreckage, pulled out 3 soldiers, greeted them under fire while the rest of his unit tried to secure the area. Dr. Reeves's voice was steady, but there was emotion underneath. One of those soldiers died in his arms. The other 2 survived because of his quick action. Walter received the Bronze Star with V device for valor. He also received burns over 30% of his body, shrapnel wounds that would require multiple surgeries, and psychological trauma that would affect him for the rest of his life. The slide changed again, showing an older photograph. Walter in a hospital bed, bandaged, staring at the camera with haunted eyes that looked decades older than his face. He came home in 1971. He was 22 years old and felt like he was 100. He couldn't find work because employers didn't want to hire damaged veterans. His girlfriend had left him. His father told him he was ashamed that Walter had participated in an immoral war. He ended up living in his car for 6 months. Eventually, he found work as a janitor, then a night security guard. He worked his way up slowly, never complaining, never asking for special treatment. He married, had 3 kids, got divorced because the PTSD made him impossible to live with. He spent the last 40 years just surviving, working, trying to be okay. Dr. Reeves paused and looked directly at the class. "And do you know what Walter looks like today? He's an elderly man with white hair. He wears comfortable shoes because the nerve damage in his feet from the burns makes it painful to tie laces. He wears his old combat jacket because it's the warmest thing he owns and reminds him that he once did something meaningful. He counts out exact change for his coffee because he's on a fixed income and has to budget carefully." Sienna felt tears burning behind her eyes. No. And sometimes," Dr. Reeves continued, her voice harder now, "people see him and make assumptions. They see the worn clothes and the old wallet and the Velcro shoes and they think homeless, poor, failure, fake. They take photos. They mock him on social media. They accuse him of stolen valor because he doesn't fit their idea of what a hero looks like. The room was deathly silent. Walter comes to the Veterans Advocacy Center twice a week for therapy. He volunteers there, mentoring younger veterans who are struggling. He donates what little money he can spare to help homeless vets. He never talks about his medals unless directly asked. He's quiet, humble, and deeply scarred by experiences none of you can imagine. Dr. Reeves clicked to the final slide. It was the same young soldier from the beginning, side by side with a recent photograph. The elderly man from Starbucks. The same man Sienna had mocked less than 2 hours ago. "This is what a hero looks like," Dr. Reeves said quietly. Then and now, the uniform changes. The body ages. The shoes go from combat boots to Velcro sneakers. But the service, the sacrifice, the dignity that remains, and it deserves your respect, even if you don't understand it. Especially if you don't understand it. Sienna's phone buzzed again. She looked down at it automatically. Her Instagram post had been shared by someone with a much larger following. But instead of agreeing with her, they'd added commentary. "This is what's wrong with our generation. No respect for veterans. No understanding of sacrifice. Just instant judgment and social media mockery. Do better." The post now had 15,000 views. The comments had shifted dramatically. "OP sounds like a privileged brat. Imagine mocking someone's shoes when they literally saved lives. Hope this goes viral so OP learns a lesson. This is disgusting behavior." And then one comment that made Sienna's heart stop. "I know that veteran. That's Walter Donovan. He's a decorated war hero who volunteers at our local VA. OP should be ashamed." Sienna quickly deleted the post, her hands trembling so badly she almost dropped her phone. But it was too late. Screenshots existed. The internet was forever. "Now," Dr. Reeves said, "I'd like to open this up for discussion. Have any of you ever made assumptions about someone based solely on their appearance? And what do you think your responsibility is when you realize you were wrong?" Several hands went up. Students started sharing stories about homeless people who turned out to be professors, about wealthy people who dressed in thrift store clothes, about the impossibility of knowing someone's story just by looking at them. Sienna couldn't raise her hand, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. When class finally ended, she grabbed her bag and tried to leave quickly, but Professor Ashford called out, "Sienna, could you stay for a moment?" Dread pooled in Sienna's stomach as the other students filed out. When the room was empty, except for her, Professor Ashford, and Dr. Reeves, the professor pulled out her phone. "I saw your Instagram post this morning," Professor Ashford said quietly. "Before you deleted it, Sienna's world..." "That doesn't make it better," Professor Ashford said. "It makes it worse. You judged someone without knowledge. You publicly mocked them. You accused them of stolen valor without any evidence. And you did it for, what, likes? Validation from strangers?" "I'm sorry," Sienna whispered. "You're sorry you got caught," Dr. Reeves said, and her voice was cold. "If your post had gotten the reaction you wanted, would you be sorry? Or would you be riding that social media high, feeling clever and superior?" Sienna couldn't answer. They both knew the truth. "Walter Donovan is a friend of mine," Dr. Reeves continued. "He called me this morning upset. Not angry, he never gets angry, just sad. Said a young woman and her friend had laughed at him at Starbucks. Said he saw them taking photos. Said he felt like he was 22 again, coming home from Vietnam to people spitting on him." Tears spilled down Sienna's cheeks. "I didn't. I wasn't trying to hurt him." "But you did hurt him. Your intentions don't erase the impact. And here's what happens now. You're going to write a formal apology, not a public one. Walter doesn't want that attention. A private letter, explaining what you did wrong and what you've learned. You're going to read it to him in person. And you're going to volunteer at the Veterans Advocacy Center for the rest of the semester. 50 hours minimum. That's not... Sienna started to protest, then stopped herself. Okay, I'll do it. This isn't punishment, Professor Ashford said more gently. It's education. Real education. The kind you can't get from a textbook. You need to understand the people you hurt. You need to see them as human beings, not as content for your social media. When do I start? Sienna asked quietly. Now, Dr. Reeves said. I'm heading back to the center. You can come with me. We'll introduce you to Walter and some of the other veterans. You can start your education today. Block 3-8. The Veterans Advocacy Center was housed in a converted office building on the east side of the city. Not the nice part where Sienna usually spent time, but not dangerous either, just forgotten. The building's exterior was plain brick with a simple sign. No fanfare. No grand entrance, just a door and a mission. Dr. Reeves led Sienna inside. The lobby was small, but welcoming, with comfortable chairs, a coffee station, and walls covered with photographs of veterans from different eras. World War II, soldiers in their 80s and 90s. Korean War veterans, Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, faces young and old, representing decades of service. We provide free counseling, job placement assistance, benefits navigation, and community support, Dr. Reeves explained as they walked. Most of our staff are veterans themselves. Many of our volunteers are too. This is a safe space where veterans can come without judgment, without questions, without having to prove they deserve help. They passed a room where a group therapy session was in progress, a circle of men and women of various ages, talking quietly. In another room, someone was helping a veteran fill out VA benefits paperwork. In the third, 2 older men played chess while a younger veteran watched and learned. Wait here, Dr. Reeves said, gesturing to a bench in the hallway. I'll see if Walter's available to talk. She disappeared through a door marked Staff Only, leaving Sienna alone with her thoughts and her shame. The photographs on the walls seemed to watch her. Young faces frozen in time, forever 20 or 19 or 18. Some of these soldiers had come home, some hadn't. All of them had sacrificed something, time, innocence, health, sometimes life itself, and she'd laughed at a man's shoes. The door opened, and Dr. Reeves reappeared. He'll see you. But Sienna, he's being far more gracious than you deserve. Don't waste this. I won't. They walked down another hallway and into a small office. Walter Donovan sat in a chair by the window, still wearing the same faded combat jacket, the same Velcro shoes. In the better light, Sienna could see more details. The burn scars on his neck that crept up from beneath his collar, the slight tremor in his hands. The way he held himself carefully, like sudden movements hurt. Mr. Donovan, this is Sienna Hartley, Dr. Reeves said. The student from this morning. Walter looked at her with those same tired eyes she'd seen at Starbucks. No anger, just weariness. I know. I recognized her in the presentation photo Patricia showed me. I'm so sorry, Sienna started, but her voice cracked. I'm so incredibly sorry. I had no right to laugh at you, to take pictures, to post what I did. It was cruel and ignorant and wrong. Why did you do it? Walter asked simply. I don't know. I thought it would be funny. I thought my followers would like it. I didn't think about you as a real person with feelings and a life and a story. I just saw surfaces, appearances. And what did those appearances tell you? Sienna forced herself to be honest, that you were poor, old, unsuccessful, maybe trying to scam people by pretending to be a veteran. I am poor, Walter said quietly. I am old, and by your definition, I probably am unsuccessful. I don't have a big house or a nice car or a fat retirement account. I worked blue-collar jobs my whole life, saved what I could, and helped my kids when they needed it. I'm living on Social Security and a small VA disability payment." He paused, his gaze steady. "But I'm not a scammer. I earned this jacket. I earned these patches. I earned the right to wear them, even if they're old and worn. They mean something to me. They mean something to the men I served with, some of whom didn't come home." "I know that now," Sienna said, tears streaming freely. "Dr. Reeves told us about your service, about what you did, about your medals." "The medals don't matter much," Walter said. "What matters is that when my brothers needed help, I was there. When they were bleeding out in the jungle, I didn't run away. I ran toward them. That's what being a medic means. That's what service means." He leaned forward slightly, wincing at the movement. "You're young. You haven't lived much yet. You haven't seen what the world can do to people, how it can break them down, how it can take everything they have. So I don't hate you for what you said, but I want you to learn from it." "I will," Sienna promised. "I'm going to volunteer here. I'm going to learn about veterans and their stories. I'm going to be better, good, because the world needs better. It needs people who see past the surface, who ask questions before judging, who understand that everyone has a story worth knowing." Dr. Reeves spoke up. "Sienna will be here 3 days a week for the rest of the semester. I'd like her to work with various veterans, hear their stories, assist with whatever tasks need doing. Help her understand what service looks like in all its forms." "I can do that," Walter said. He looked at Sienna again. "You ever been around veterans before?" "No, sir." "Then you're in for an education. We're not all heroes. We're not all broken. We're just people who served. Some of us are proud of it. Some of us regret it. Most of us are somewhere in between. But all of us deserve basic respect. Not worship, not pity, just respect. I understand. I hope you do. Because disrespect, that casual, thoughtless cruelty you showed this morning, it's another kind of wound. It may not draw blood, but it cuts just as deep. Especially for those of us who already carry so many scars." He stood slowly, carefully, and extended his hand. Sienna shook it, noting how his grip was still firm despite the tremor, how his handshake was deliberate and meaningful in a way her generation had forgotten. "Welcome to the Veterans Advocacy Center," Walter said. "I hope you actually learned something here, not just about us, but about yourself. Thank you for giving me this chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. That's what I learned in the war. We're all just trying to survive, trying to be better than our worst moments. I'm giving you the same grace I wish someone had given me when I came home." He left the office, his footsteps slow but steady in the hallway. Dr. Reeves handed Sienna a clipboard with paperwork. "Fill this out. Volunteer agreement, background check authorization, emergency contact information. Then I'll get you started with orientation." "Dr. Reeves, why is he being so nice to me? After what I did?" "Because that's who Walter is. He spent 50 years trying to save people, first in combat, then in life. He can't stop helping people even when they've hurt him. It's both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness." Sienna took the clipboard with shaking hands and began filling out the forms. Through the window, she could see Walter in the common area, talking with a younger veteran, both of them laughing about something. The contrast between the broken soldier in Dr. Reeves's presentation slides and this gentle, patient man was stark. War had tried to destroy him. Life had tried to grind him down. And somehow he'd survived with his humanity intact. Could she say the same about herself? She'd lived 20 years in comfort and privilege, never facing anything worse than a bad breakup or a disappointing grade. And yet she'd become someone capable of casual cruelty, someone who weaponized. The first week of volunteering was humbling in ways Sienna hadn't anticipated. She started with simple tasks, answering phones, filing paperwork, making coffee, organizing donation drives. The center ran on a shoestring budget, mostly grants and private donations, so every volunteer hour mattered. But Sienna quickly realized the real value wasn't in the work she did. It was in the conversations she had while doing it. There was Raymond, a Gulf War veteran in his 50s who'd become homeless after his wife died, and he couldn't keep up with the mortgage. He'd been living in his truck for 3 years before finding the center, which helped him secure VA benefits and transitional housing. Now he volunteered here too, helping other homeless veterans navigate the system. People think homelessness is about laziness, Raymond told her while they sorted donated clothing. They don't understand how fast it happens. Medical bills, job loss, mental health crisis, addiction, PTSD. Sometimes it's just one bad month, one unexpected expense, or one missed paycheck. And suddenly you're choosing between rent and food. And once you're on the street, it's incredibly hard to climb back out. How did you do it? Sienna asked. Stubbornness. And places like this, people like Patricia and Walter, who didn't give up on me when I'd given up on myself. There was Lucia, a Marine Corps veteran in her 30s who'd served in Iraq. She was a single mother with 2 kids, working 2 jobs and going to community college at night. She came to the Center for Childcare Assistance and Career Counseling. The hardest part about being a female veteran, Lucia said while they assembled care packages for deployed troops, is that people don't believe you served. They assume support roles or desk jobs. When I say I was a combat engineer, they look confused. When I talk about defusing IEDs or building forward operating bases under fire, they think I'm exaggerating. It's exhausting having to constantly prove yourself. I'm sorry, Sienna said quietly. It's not your fault specifically. It's cultural. We have this image of veterans as men, as certain types of men. Anyone who doesn't fit that image gets questioned. Women, people of color, LGBTQ veterans, young veterans, old veterans who don't look the way we expect old veterans to look. The comments stung because Sienna knew Lucia was talking about her. About what she'd done to Walter. There was Devon, an Afghanistan veteran in his 20s, Sienna's age, actually, who'd lost both legs to an IED. He used a wheelchair and was learning to walk with prosthetics. He came to the center for physical therapy support groups and recreational activities. Want to know something funny? Devon said while they played cards in the common room. Before I enlisted, I thought veterans were these tough, stoic, heroic figures. Then I became one and realized we're just regular people who signed a contract. Some of us are heroes. Some of us are assholes. Most of us are just trying to figure life out, same as everyone else. But you sacrifice so much, Sienna said, gesturing to his wheelchair. Yeah, I did. But I also gained things. I gained brothers, sisters, a sense of purpose, skills, discipline, perspective. Would I trade my legs to have never served? I don't know. That's not how life works. You don't get to cherry-pick your experiences. You just deal with what comes and try to find meaning in it. And then there was Walter, who Sienna saw almost every time she volunteered. He was always there, mentoring younger vets, helping with administrative tasks, just being a quiet, steady presence. He never mentioned the Starbucks incident again, never rubbed her face in her mistake. He just treated her with patient kindness, like a grandfather with a confused grandchild. One afternoon, Sienna found him in the resource library, organizing donated books. She'd been assigned to help him, and they worked in comfortable silence for a while before she gathered the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. Mr. Donovan, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you not hate me? After what I did, how can you even stand to be around me? Walter carefully placed a book on the shelf before answering. Because hate takes energy I don't have anymore. Because you're not the first person to judge me, and you won't be the last. And because I remember being young and stupid and making mistakes that hurt people. But I was so cruel. Yes, you were. But cruelty born from ignorance is different from cruelty born from malice. You didn't know my story. You didn't understand what those shoes and that jacket meant to me. You were thoughtless, not evil. There's a difference. He pulled out another book and studied its cover, a memoir by a Vietnam veteran. Want to know what real cruelty looks like? It's coming home from war and having people spit on you. Having protesters call you a baby killer. Having employers refuse to hire you because you're damaged goods. Having your own father turn his back on you because you participated in something he disagreed with. That happened to you. All of it. I came home in 1971 and America didn't want me. The war was unpopular, and we were the face of it. Never mind that most of us were drafted. Never mind that we were following orders, doing our jobs, trying to survive. We were convenient targets for all the rage and frustration people felt about the war. He placed the book on the shelf and turned to face her. So when a young woman laughs at my shoes in Starbucks, that doesn't even register on my scale of cruelty. It stings, sure. It's embarrassing, but it's not spitting, it's not violence, it's just ignorance. And ignorance can be fixed through education. Is that why you agreed to let me volunteer here? To educate me? Partly. But also because I believe in second chances. I needed them when I came home. I needed people to see past my trauma, my anger, my brokenness, and give me opportunities to rebuild. If I don't offer that same grace to others, then what was the point of all those second chances I received? Sienna felt tears welling up again. She'd cried more in the past week than she had in years. I wish I could take it back, she said. The post, the laughter, all of it. You can't, but you can learn from it. You can be better going forward. That's all any of us can do. Acknowledge our mistakes, make amends where possible, and commit to doing better next time. They continued organizing books in silence. After a while, Walter spoke again. You know what these books are? He asked, gesturing to the shelves. These are stories. Every veteran has one. Some are heroic, some are tragic, some are both, some are neither. Just ordinary people doing an extraordinary job. But they're all worth knowing, all worth preserving. Will you tell me yours? Sienna asked. Your whole story, I mean. Dr. Reeves told us some of it in class, but I want to hear it from you. Walter considered this. It's not a happy story. I don't need it to be happy. I need it to be true. He nodded slowly. All right, but not today. Come back tomorrow, and I'll tell you about Vietnam. About the jungle and the fear and the friends I lost. About coming home to a country that hated me. About the 50 years I've spent trying to make peace with what I saw and what I did. Thank you, Sienna said, for trusting me with it. Everyone's story deserves to be heard by someone, Walter said simply. Even mine. The next day, Sienna arrived early. Walter was waiting in the small office, 2 cups of coffee on the desk, one for each of them. Sit, he said, and she did. Where do I start? He mused, staring into his coffee. I suppose I start with why I enlisted. Dr. Reeves said you enlisted against your parents' wishes. That's right. It was 1967. I was 18, just graduated high school. The draft was pulling in boys left and right, and I figured if I was going to go anyway, I might as well choose my role. I wanted to be a medic, wanted to save lives, not take them. Were you scared? Terrified, but also excited. I believed I was doing something noble, something important. I believed in service, in sacrifice, in protecting freedom. I was naive, but I was sincere. He took a sip of coffee, organizing his thoughts. Basic training was hard, but manageable. Medic school was harder. They cram years of medical knowledge into a few months, teach you to make life or death decisions in seconds. Then they ship you off to war, and nothing can prepare you for what that's actually like. What was it like? Hot, wet, terrifying. The jungle was alive with things trying to kill you. Enemy soldiers, booby traps, disease, snakes, insects. You never felt safe. You never slept well. You learned to function on adrenaline and caffeine and sheer stubbornness. His hands trembled slightly as he held his cup. Sienna noticed he did that sometimes, especially when talking about difficult things. My first casualty was a kid from Texas named Bobby Rodriguez. He was 19, same age as me, stepped on a mine. I tried to save him, but there was too much damage. He died holding my hand, crying for his mother. Walter's voice stayed steady, but his eyes were far away. I can still hear him. 50+ years later, I can still hear him calling for his mama. I'm sorry, Sienna said quietly. That was the first. There were so many others. Some I saved, some I couldn't. You learn to compartmentalize, to shut down the emotions and just do the job. Triage, treat, move to the next one. Don't think about the face, the name, the life that's slipping away. Just focus on the work. He described firefights where he'd crawled through mud and blood to reach wounded soldiers, helicopter evacuations under fire, the constant fear of ambush, the way you bonded with your unit because they were all you had, the only people who understood what you were going through. Second tour was worse, he continued. First tour, you're scared but optimistic. You think you'll make a difference, win the war, come home a hero. Second tour, you know better. You know the war is unwinnable. You know politicians are lying. You know you're just trying to survive long enough to go home. Why did you go back? Because my unit needed experienced medics. Because I felt guilty leaving them. Because I didn't know who I was if I wasn't a combat medic. He laughed bitterly. Turned out I'd have to figure that out anyway. He told her about the ambush, the IED, the burning vehicle, the screaming wounded, about pulling men from the wreckage while his own uniform caught fire, about the smell of burning flesh, the weight of a dying soldier, the choice to keep working, even when his own body was screaming in pain. I got the Bronze Star for that, he said. They call it valor. I call it survival instinct. You don't think in moments like that. You just act. You do what needs to be done, because the alternative is letting your brothers die. That sounds like valor to me, Sienna said. Maybe, but it came at a cost. Third-degree burns, shrapnel wounds, nerve damage, psychological trauma that I didn't have a name for back then. We didn't talk about PTSD in the 70s. We just called it shell shock or battle fatigue, or more often, we didn't call it anything. We just suffered in silence. He described coming home, the hostile reception, the difficulty finding work, the nightmares that made sleep impossible, his girlfriend leaving because she couldn't handle his mood swings, his father's disappointment. The months living in his car because he couldn't afford rent and couldn't bear to be inside four walls. How did you survive? Sienna asked. Honestly, I don't know. Some days I didn't want to. Some days I thought about ending it, but something kept me going. Stubbornness, maybe. Or the memory of the guys who didn't make it home. I felt like I owed it to them to keep trying. Eventually, he'd found work. Met a woman named Linda who didn't mind his nightmares. Got married, had kids, tried to build a normal life. But the war never left him. The burn scars are visible, he said, pulling up his sleeve to show Sienna the damaged tissue on his arm. Melted, discolored, a permanent reminder. But the invisible scars are worse. The hypervigilance, the startle response, the way certain sounds or smells trigger flashbacks. The guilt over who lived and who died. That never goes away. You just learn to manage it. His marriage ended after 15 years. Linda had tried, but living with someone who woke up screaming, who couldn't handle crowded spaces, who disappeared into depressive episodes, it wore her down. The divorce was amicable, but it hurt. My kids, Walter's voice cracked for the first time. My kids grew up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. I loved them, but I didn't know how to show it. I was too broken, too focused on just getting through each day. They're adults now, and we have decent relationships, but I know I failed them. I know I wasn't the father they deserved. They must understand, Sienna said. They must know what you were dealing with. Understanding doesn't erase the hurt. They can know intellectually that I was traumatized and doing my best, but that doesn't change the fact that I missed recitals and games and important moments because I was having a flashback or a panic attack. It doesn't change the childhood they actually had. He drank the last of his coffee and set the empty cup down carefully. So here I am, 75 years old, living on a fixed income in a small apartment, wearing old clothes because they're comfortable and familiar, still volunteering here because it gives me purpose, still trying to make sense of a war that happened 50 years ago. Still carrying scars, both visible and invisible, and still helping people, Sienna added. Still mentoring veterans who are where you were. Still offering grace to stupid college students who mock your shoes. Walter smiled slightly. Yeah, still doing that. Because what else is there? You can't change the past. You can only try to make the present a little better. Try to prevent someone else from making the mistakes you made or suffering the way you suffered. Thank you for telling me, Sienna said, for trusting me with your story. Stories are meant to be shared. Otherwise, what's the point? We live, we suffer, we learn, and then we die, and all that experience is lost. Unless we pass it on. Unless we teach the next generation what we learned the hard way. What do you want me to learn from your story? Walter thought about this for a long moment. I want you to learn that everyone has depth. Everyone has a history that shaped them. The person you pass on the street, the person serving your coffee, the person in worn-out clothes, they all have stories as complex as yours, maybe more so. And you have no right to judge them based on what you can see from the outside. I understand that now. Do you? Or do you understand it intellectually, but haven't internalized it yet? Because understanding and actual change, those are different things. The test will come the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your idea of normal or successful or worthy. Will you laugh? Will you judge? Or will you pause and think, I wonder what their story is? I hope I'll do better, Sienna said honestly. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I hope I'll at least pause, think, consider. That's all anyone can ask. Perfection isn't the goal. Growth is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, Sienna could see other veterans arriving for the day, some old, some young, some in between. Each one carrying their own invisible weight, Mr. Donovan. Can I ask one more thing? Sure. Your wallet. The one I made fun of. Is there a story there? Walter pulled the wallet from his pocket. The same cracked leather, the same electrical tape holding it together. He opened it and showed her the inside. Behind the clear plastic window was a faded photograph. Young Walter in his dress uniform, arm around a pretty girl in a 60s-style dress. That's Linda, taken right before my first deployment. She gave me this wallet as a going-away present. Told me to keep her picture close to my heart. He traced the edge of the photograph with one scarred finger. We didn't last, but I kept the wallet, kept her picture. It reminds me that I was once someone capable of being loved, that there was a time before all this damage. That's beautiful, Sienna said, her voice thick with emotion. It's bittersweet. But that's life, isn't it? Nothing is purely good or purely bad. Everything is complicated, layered, full of contradictions. This wallet is old and damaged and held together with tape. It's also a treasured possession that connects me to a version of myself I can barely remember. He tucked it back into his pocket. So, when you laughed at it, you weren't just mocking an old wallet. You were mocking a piece of my history, a connection to love and hope and the person I used to be. You couldn't have known that, which is why I'm not angry. But maybe now you understand why appearances don't tell the whole story. I do understand, and I'm sorrier than I can express. I know, and I've forgiven you. Now you need to forgive yourself. And 3 weeks into her volunteer work, Sienna had become a regular presence at the center. She knew most of the veterans by name now, knew their stories, their struggles, their small victories. She'd helped Raymond prepare for a job interview. He got the position and moved into permanent housing. She'd babysat Lucia's kids while Lucia took a certification exam. She'd played cards with Devon and listened to him process his anger and grief about his injuries. She'd organized donation drives, filed endless paperwork, and learned to make coffee the way veterans liked it, strong enough to stand a spoon in. But more importantly, she'd learned to listen. Really listen. Not just waiting for her turn to talk, but actually absorbing what people were saying. Hearing the words beneath the words, understanding the pain behind the stoic facade. Her friends had noticed the change. Becca had asked multiple times what was going on, why Sienna was acting weird, why she'd deleted all her Instagram posts and barely posted anymore. "I'm just taking a break from social media," Sienna had explained, "focusing on real life for a while." "But you loved Instagram. You were getting so many followers." "Yeah, well, I realized those followers don't actually know me, and I don't know them. It was just a bunch of strangers performing for each other." Becca had looked at her like she'd grown a second head. They didn't hang out much after that. Other friendships faded too. The people who'd liked and shared her cruel posts, who'd participated in the mockery, they didn't understand why she'd changed. Didn't understand why she no longer wanted to grab coffee and gossip. Why she didn't find the same things funny anymore. "You're no fun anymore," someone had told her at a party. "Maybe I never was fun," Sienna had replied. "Maybe I was just mean and you mistook it for entertainment." She'd left early, but she'd gained something too. The veterans at the center had become, not quite friends, but something deeper. They were teachers, mentors, windows into experiences she'd never have otherwise known. They challenged her assumptions, broadened her perspective, forced her to reckon with her privilege and ignorance. One afternoon, Walter asked her to help him with a special project. "We're planning a Veterans Day event," he explained. "Nothing fancy, just a gathering where veterans can share their stories and the community can listen. I'd like you to help organize it." "Me? Why me?" "Because you've learned the importance of listening. Because you understand now that these stories matter. Because I trust you to treat them with respect." The event was planned for November 11th, Veterans Day. They'd invited local politicians, school groups, families, anyone who wanted to attend. The center's main hall was decorated with flags and photographs of veterans from different eras. Folding chairs were set up in rows, with a small stage at the front. Sienna spent weeks preparing, reaching out to local media, coordinating with speakers, arranging refreshments, managing RSVPs. It was more work than she'd done for any college project, but it mattered in a way her grades never had. The night before the event, she stayed late at the center, making final preparations. Walter found her in the main hall, arranging flowers on the tables. "You've done good work," he said. "This is going to be a meaningful event because of your efforts. I just want people to hear what I've heard, to understand what I've learned. And what have you learned?" Sienna set down the flowers and turned to face him. "I've learned that heroism isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's not what we see in movies. It's quiet and humble and often goes unrecognized. It's Raymond getting up every day to look for work, even when it feels hopeless. It's Lucia balancing 2 jobs and school and motherhood. It's Devon learning to walk again on prosthetics. It's you showing up here week after week to help others when you're still dealing with your own trauma. That's a good answer. I've also learned that privilege is invisible to the people who have it. I'd never thought about the fact that I could afford $7 coffee without thinking, that I had a roof over my head and food in my fridge and a college education. I just assumed everyone had those things, or that people who didn't have them had somehow failed. I didn't understand systemic barriers or trauma or how quickly circumstances can change. And now I understand that there but for the grace of God go I, that I'm not better than anyone, just luckier. And that luck comes with responsibility. If I have advantages others don't, I should use them to help, not to hurt. To lift up, not tear down. Walter nodded approvingly. You've come a long way from the girl who laughed at an old man's shoes. I hope so. But I know I still have more to learn. I know I'll probably make more mistakes, say things that are hurtful without meaning to, miss nuances I should catch. But at least now I'm paying attention. At least now I'm trying. That's all we can ask of each other. Not perfection, but effort. Not immediate transformation, but consistent growth. They finished the preparations in comfortable silence, and Sienna drove home, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Pride. Not the shallow pride of social media likes and validation, but genuine satisfaction in work well done. In making a difference, however small. The next morning, Veterans Day, Sienna arrived early to do final checks. The hall looked beautiful, respectful and solemn, but also warm and welcoming. The flowers she'd arranged gave color to the space. The photographs on the walls told stories of service across generations. People started arriving at noon. First the veterans who volunteered at the center, then families, then curious community members who'd seen the flyers Sienna had posted around town. By 1 p.m., the hall was nearly full. Dr. Reeves opened the event with a short speech about service and sacrifice. Then she introduced the first speaker, Raymond, who talked about his time in the Gulf War and his struggle with homelessness. He was nervous but honest, his voice shaking but his message clear. Veterans need support, not judgment. Next was Lucia, who spoke about being a woman in combat, about defusing bombs, while people back home debated whether women belonged in the military at all. She spoke about the pride she felt in her service and the frustration of constantly having to prove herself. Devon rolled onto the stage in his wheelchair and spoke about the moment the IED exploded, about waking up without legs, about the long road to accepting his new reality. But he also spoke about hope, about the support he'd found at the center, about learning that losing limbs didn't mean losing purpose. And then it was Walter's turn. He walked slowly to the microphone, wearing his old combat jacket and his Velcro shoes, and Sienna felt her throat tighten with emotion. This man, this kind, humble, deeply scarred man, was about to share his story with a room full of strangers. "My name is Walter Donovan," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I served as a combat medic in Vietnam, and I'm here today to tell you that war never really ends. Not for the people who fight them." For the next 20 minutes he spoke. He talked about the jungle, the fear, the friends he'd lost, about coming home to a country that didn't want him, about 50 years of struggling with invisible wounds, about finding purpose in helping others because it was the only thing that made the suffering feel meaningful. He talked about the judgment he'd faced over the years. People who assumed he was homeless, or lazy, or mentally ill, or faking his service. About being told he doesn't look like a veteran because he's old and worn and broken in ways that don't fit Hollywood's image of military service. And then he said something that made Sienna's heart stop. "A few weeks ago, a young woman laughed at my shoes in a coffee shop. took photos, posted online calling me a fraud. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. But I'd also be lying if I said I was angry. Because that young woman didn't know my story. She didn't know what these shoes mean to me, or why I wear this jacket, or what I've sacrificed. The room was completely silent. But you know what? That young woman is here today. She's been volunteering at this center for weeks, learning about veterans, hearing our stories, trying to understand the people she judged. And that takes courage. It takes humility. It takes a willingness to admit you were wrong and do the work to be better. Oh God, he was talking about her, in front of everyone, so I want to publicly thank Sienna Hartley, Walter continued, and heads turned to look at her. Thank you for being willing to learn. Thank you for doing the hard work of growth. Thank you for organizing this event and giving all of us a platform to share our stories. You made a mistake, but you owned it and you changed. That's what matters. Applause filled the room. People were looking at her, some smiling, some nodding in understanding. Sienna felt tears streaming down her face. Walter continued speaking, finishing his remarks with a call to action. Listen to veterans. Hire veterans. Support veterans. Don't put us on a pedestal, but don't dismiss us either. See us as complex human beings who served our country and are now trying to live good lives. That's all we ask. Just basic recognition of our humanity. More applause. Walter stepped off the stage, and Dr. Reeves wrapped up the event with closing remarks about supporting the center and staying connected with the veteran community. As people mingled afterward, eating refreshments and talking quietly, Sienna found Walter. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Why thank me publicly?" Because people need to see redemption. They need to see that mistakes don't have to define you, that growth is possible, that second chances can lead to real change. Your story, our story together, it's an example of what's possible when people are willing to learn. I don't feel worthy of being an example. None of us do. But that's not how it works. We don't get to choose whether our experiences help others. We just live them honestly and hope something good comes from them. He put his scarred hand on her shoulder. "You've done good work here, Sienna. Real work. The kind that changes lives, yours and others. I'm proud of you. Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For giving me this chance. For teaching me. For being patient with my ignorance. Thank you for being teachable. That's rarer than you'd think. The Veterans Day event had unexpected ripples. Local media covered it, not major networks, but community newspapers and blogs. They ran stories about the center, about the veterans who'd spoken, and about the event's young organizer who'd transformed from social media mocker to veteran advocate. Sienna hadn't wanted the attention, but Dr. Reeves convinced her it could do good. "Your story resonates with your generation," she'd said. "They see you as one of them. If you can change, if you can learn and grow, maybe they can too." So Sienna did an interview with the local paper. She was honest about what she'd done, how ignorant she'd been, what she'd learned at the center. The article ran with the headline, "From Viral Mockery to Veteran Advocacy, One Student's Journey." The response was mixed. Some people applauded her growth. Others said she was only doing it for redemption, to make herself look good. Some veterans reached out to thank her for raising awareness. Others said she didn't deserve forgiveness. "You can't control how people respond," Walter told her when she expressed frustration about the negative comments. "You can only control your actions. Keep doing the work. Keep showing up. Keep learning. Eventually, your actions will speak louder than your critics." Her volunteer hours at the center were complete. She'd fulfilled her 50-hour requirement, but she kept coming back. The work felt important in a way her marketing classes didn't. The relationships she'd built felt real in a way her Instagram friendships never had. She changed her major from marketing to social work. Her parents were horrified. Social work, her mother had said. What kind of career is that? How will you support yourself? I don't know, Sienna admitted. But I know I can't go back to caring about brand strategy and consumer manipulation. I need to do something that actually helps people. This is because of those veterans, isn't it? Her father said. They've filled your head with some guilt complex. They've opened my eyes to reality, to the fact that most people are struggling in ways I never had to think about. And I want to help. That's not a guilt complex. That's called having a conscience. The conversation hadn't gone well, but Sienna was committed. She'd found something that mattered, and she wasn't going to abandon it just because it wasn't profitable or prestigious. She continued volunteering at the center through the winter. She helped with holiday fundraisers, organized a coat drive for homeless veterans, assisted with benefits paperwork, and most importantly, she continued listening to stories. There was Gerald, a Korean War veteran in his 90s who'd never talked about his service until he found the center. Nobody asked, he said simply. Korea was the forgotten war. We came home and everyone had moved on. So I moved on too. Never processed what happened. Never dealt with the trauma. Just buried it for 70 years. There was Tasha, an Iraq veteran dealing with the invisible wounds of military sexual trauma. People don't want to hear about it, she said. They want stories about heroism and combat, not about what soldiers do to each other when the enemy isn't around. But it's part of the veteran experience, and it deserves recognition too. There was Carlos, a Vietnam veteran like Walter, who'd spent 40 years addicted to drugs before finally getting clean. The VA failed me, he said. The government failed me, but I also failed myself. I chose the needle over getting help. I'm not making excuses, just acknowledging that recovery is complicated, and judgment doesn't help anyone. Each story added another layer to Sienna's understanding. The veteran experience wasn't monolithic. It was diverse, complex, full of contradictions. Some veterans were conservative, some liberal. Some were proud of their service, some had regrets. Some had successful post-military lives, some struggled. But they all deserved respect. They all deserved to have their stories heard. In February, Sienna proposed a new project, an oral history archive. She'd record video interviews with veterans who used the center, preserve their stories, make them available for education and research. Dr. Reeves loved the idea. We've been wanting to do something like this, but didn't have the resources or expertise. You could make this your senior capstone project. Do it properly, with academic rigor, while also creating something meaningful for the community. So Sienna learned how to conduct oral history interviews. She studied research ethics, got proper consent forms, learned how to ask questions that drew out meaningful stories without being exploitative or traumatizing. Walter was her first interview. They sat in the center's library, camera rolling, and he told his story in full. From enlistment to combat to homecoming to the present day. 2 hours of unfiltered history. The fear, the loss, the trauma, the survival, the attempted healing. When they finished, Walter looked exhausted, but satisfied. That's the first time I've told the whole story, he admitted. Usually I give pieces, but you asked the right questions. You made space for the hard parts, the ugly parts, the parts I usually skip. Thank you for trusting me with it. This is important work you're doing. Future generations need to hear these stories, need to understand what war costs, not just in money or geopolitics, but in human lives and human souls. Over the next several months, Sienna interviewed dozens of veterans. Each interview added to the archive, creating a resource that local schools and universities could use. The stories would outlive their tellers, preserved for education and remembrance. In May, as Sienna prepared for graduation, Dr. Reeves offered her a position at the center, part-time while she finished her degree, full-time after graduation if she wanted it. "You've proven yourself," Dr. Reeves said. "You came in here as punishment, but you've become an asset. You understand veterans in a way most young people don't. You've done the work of learning and growing. I'd be honored to have you on staff." Sienna accepted immediately. The job didn't pay much, non-profit work never did. But it came with purpose, with meaning, with the knowledge that she was making a real difference. On graduation day, her parents attended the ceremony. They were polite but cool, still disappointed in her choices. But sitting in the audience, wearing his old combat jacket and his Velcro shoes, was Walter. Beside him were Raymond, Lucia, Devon, and several other veterans she'd come to know. When Sienna crossed the stage to receive her diploma, they stood and applauded. Not the polite golf clap of academic ceremonies, but genuine, enthusiastic celebration. Other veterans in the audience joined them, standing to honor one of their own, because that's what Sienna had become. One of them. Not a veteran herself. She'd never serve, never fully understand that experience. But an ally, an advocate, someone who'd seen their humanity and chosen to honor it. After the ceremony, Sienna found Walter in the crowd. "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging him carefully, mindful of his injuries. "Wouldn't have missed it. This is a big day. It's because of you. All of this, the degree, the job, the person I've become, it's because you gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one." "You've given me something too," Walter said quietly. "You've reminded me that people can change, that grace isn't wasted on the young, that maybe my story, my service, my suffering, maybe it means something after all, because it helped transform you, and you're going to help transform others. I hope so. I know so. You've already started." They walked out of the auditorium together, the veteran in his worn clothes and the graduate in her cap and gown. 2 years later, Sienna had fully settled into her role at the Veterans Advocacy Center. She'd helped expand the Oral History Project, which now included over 100 interviews. She'd organized community events, coordinated with local schools to bring veteran speakers into classrooms, and assisted countless veterans in navigating the bureaucratic nightmare of VA benefits. She'd also reconnected with some of her old college acquaintances, not the ones who'd encouraged her cruelty, but the ones who'd been uncomfortable with it but hadn't spoken up. "I wish I'd said something," one of them confessed over coffee. "When you posted that thing about the veteran, I felt like it was wrong, but I didn't want to seem preachy or kill the mood. I just stayed silent. Silence is complicity," Sienna said gently. "I learned that the hard way. But it's never too late to speak up, to challenge cruelty when you see it, to choose kindness over fitting in." The center had grown too. More funding, more programs, more reach. They'd opened a second location and were planning a third. Dr. Reeves credited Sienna's youth outreach initiatives, bringing the veteran story to schools and universities, making it relevant to younger generations. "You bridge the gap," Dr. Reeves had said. "You speak their language, understand their culture, but you also deeply respect the veteran experience. That combination is rare and valuable." Walter continued volunteering, though age was slowing him down. He was 77 now, moving more carefully, taking more breaks. But his mind was sharp, his wisdom deep, his commitment unwavering. One afternoon, Sienna found him in his usual spot in the library, organizing the very books they'd worked on together 2 years ago. "You know you don't have to keep volunteering," she said. "You've done more than enough." "I know, but what else would I do? Sit at home and watch TV? Wait to die? This place gives me purpose. These veterans need mentors who've been through it. And honestly, I need them too. Need to feel useful. Need to feel connected. You are useful. You're invaluable. To you, maybe. But the world doesn't usually value old veterans. We're expensive. Medical costs, benefits, pensions. We're inconvenient. Our stories are uncomfortable. Our needs are complex. We're reminders of wars people want to forget. So when someone does value us, when someone like you sees us as worth listening to, it means everything. Sienna sat beside him, and they worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Walter spoke again. I've been thinking about that day in Starbucks. When you laughed at my shoes. I'm still sorry about that. I know. But I've been thinking about it differently lately. What if that moment was necessary? What if it was the catalyst you needed to become who you are now? If I hadn't worn those shoes, if you hadn't laughed, if Dr. Reeves hadn't intervened, would you have found your way here? Would you have discovered this calling? I don't know, Sienna admitted. Maybe eventually, but probably not this soon, or in this way. So maybe the whole thing, the mockery, the consequences, the redemption, maybe it was all part of a larger story. Not that the cruelty was okay, but that even our worst moments can lead to growth if we're willing to learn from them. That's a generous way to look at it. I'm an old man. I don't have time for grudges or resentment. I'd rather find meaning in suffering, purpose in pain. That's what's kept me alive this long. They continued working, and Sienna thought about the twists of fate that had brought her here. A moment of cruelty, a viral post, a disappointed professor, a billionaire veteran director, a patient teacher in Velcro shoes. All of it had conspired to transform her from someone shallow and cruel into someone with depth and compassion. It hadn't been comfortable. It hadn't been easy. But it had been necessary. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reeves. Can you come to my office? There's someone here who wants to meet you. Sienna excused herself and headed to the director's office. Inside, she found Dr. Reeves with a young woman, maybe 19, with nervous energy and tear-stained cheeks. Sienna, this is Lauren. She's a college student who made a similar mistake to the one you made 2 years ago. She posted something cruel about a veteran online. It went viral, and now she's facing consequences. I thought maybe you could talk to her. Sienna looked at this young woman, this mirror of her past self, and saw the fear, the shame, the confusion. She sat down and smiled gently. Hi, Lauren. I'm Sienna, and I know exactly how you're feeling right now. How could you know? Because 2 years ago I was you. I laughed at a veteran's shoes in Starbucks, posted about it online, called him a fraud. It went viral, and I got destroyed in the comments. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Lauren looked skeptical. How could that be a good thing? Because it forced me to confront who I was, to see my own cruelty, to learn about the people I'd hurt. And eventually, it led me here, to meaningful work, to real relationships, to becoming someone I'm actually proud of. But everyone hates me right now. They don't hate you. They hate what you did. There's a difference, and you get to choose what happens next. You can hide from this, delete everything and hope it blows over, or you can lean into it. Apologize sincerely. Do the work of learning and growing. Transform your mistake into a catalyst for change. How do I do that? You start by listening, by understanding, by seeing veterans as human beings instead of stereotypes or content for social media. And I can help you with that. We all can, Dr. Reeves nodded. We're offering you the same opportunity we gave Sienna. Volunteer here. Learn from veterans directly. Hear their stories. Understand what service and sacrifice actually mean. It won't erase what you did, but it will change who you become. Lauren looked between them, processing. What if I'm not capable of changing? You are, Sienna said firmly. Everyone is. But it requires humility. It requires admitting you were wrong and being willing to do the hard work of being better. It's uncomfortable and embarrassing and difficult, but it's also transformative. I promise you that. Okay, Lauren said quietly. I'll do it. When do I start? Right now, if you want. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Sienna led Lauren to the library, where Walter was still organizing books. He looked up as they entered, his wise eyes taking in the nervous young woman. Mr. Donovan, this is Lauren. She's going to be volunteering here. She made a mistake similar to mine, and she's here to learn from it. I thought maybe you could talk to her. Share your story. Help her understand. Walter set down his books and smiled kindly. Of course. Come sit, Lauren. Let me tell you about a war that happened 50 years ago, and why it still matters today. As Lauren sat down, Sienna quietly excused herself. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Walter begin to tell his story. The same story he'd told her 2 years ago, the story that had changed everything. The cycle continued. Judgment, consequence, education, transformation. Walter's suffering, his service, his sacrifice, his scarred hands and traumatized soul, it wasn't wasted. It was teaching. It was healing. It was changing lives, one student at a time. Sienna returned to her office and looked at the photographs on her wall. There was one of her with Walter at her graduation, another of the Veterans Day event, a third of her interviewing a World War II veteran for the Oral History Project. These were her achievements now. Not Instagram likes or viral posts, but real connections, real impact, real meaning. Her phone buzzed with the notification. Someone had tagged her in a social media post. She almost ignored it. She'd learned to curate her digital life carefully, to avoid the toxicity that had once consumed her. But curiosity won. She clicked. It was a post from one of her old college friends. Remember when Sienna Hartley used to mock people for likes? Now she's literally changing lives and helping veterans. Growth is real. Do better, friends. The post had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments. Most were positive, supportive, encouraging. A few were skeptical. Some were cruel, saying she was just performing redemption, that she didn't deserve praise for basic human decency. Sienna read them all, then closed the app without responding. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need validation from strangers. She knew the work she was doing was real. She knew the relationships she'd built were genuine. She knew she'd become someone worth being. That night, before leaving the center, she found Walter one last time. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for being patient with me, for seeing past my worst moment, for believing I could be better. Thank you for proving me right," Walter replied. "For doing the work, for becoming not just better but good, truly good. I'm still learning, still growing, as am I. That never stops. We're all just works in progress, trying to be a little better today than we were yesterday."